This morning, a major escalation in President Trump's global trade war, with the president releasing a letter announcing a 50% tariff on imports from Brazil starting August 1st. Mr. Trump specifically pointing to the ongoing prosecution of one of his longtime allies, Brazil's former president Jair Bolsonaro. A show of support for the far-right politician who's been barred for running for office in Brazil this decade and is facing charges for an alleged coup to overturn his 2022 election loss, which he denies.
Trump has failed to make 90 deals in 90 days because, shockingly, he has found that many governments around the world are unwilling to work with him or to cave to his tariff threats. But starting August 1st, he's just announced that he is imposing a 50% tariff on all goods imported from Brazil. However, the story isn't just the tariff itself, it's why he's imposing this particular tariff. So if you'll recall, Brazil ousted its former right-wing leader Bolsonaro when it elected its far more progressive president Lula da Silva. But Bolsonaro did not go quietly into that good night. In an effort to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power, or just the transfer of power at all, attempts were made to shut down various aspects of the Brazilian government, to arrest high-ranking officials in the government, to assassinate Lula da Silva, and overall to consolidate power for Bolsonaro. Almost exactly 2 years after the January 6th Capitol riot here in the United States, Bolsonaro supporters stormed their own Congress and Supreme Court on January 8th, 2023. Ultimately, Lula da Silva was made president, over 1,400 rioters were charged, and Bolsonaro and others were accused of staging a coup and attempting to overthrow the Brazilian government. Earlier this year, Bolsonaro was indicted for the coup attempt and blocked from running for political office ever again. And Trump apparently took it very personally. Can't imagine why.
Eu fui o último presidente a reconhecer as eleições de há 2 anos aqui nos Estados Unidos.
I was the last president in the world to recognize the results of the elections in America 2 years ago.
Continuo fiel aos nossos princípios.
I continue to be loyal to our principles.
Ao nosso lema.
I'm still faithful to our motto.
Deus, pátria, família e liberdade.
God, homeland, liberty, God, homeland, family, and liberty.
Muito obrigado a todos os senhores.
Thank you very much to all of you.
Well, Trump and his administration have been busy posting these tariff letters on Truth Social, which, by the way, are not legally binding, and they don't indicate that any kind of agreement or deal or anything has been struck. They're just letters that Trump is sending to countries telling them how much he is going to tariff them unless they meet his very specific demands. As reporter Garrett Hake put it, on Sunday morning, Scott Bessent said, "We are close to several deals as always. I would expect to see announcements over the next couple of days. We're going to have 100 tariff letters done in the next few days." And then a few days later, on Thursday, 0 new trade deal announcements, 22 letters posted. Some quick context before we get to this Brazil letter. The U.S. currently has a trade surplus with Brazil. Keep that in mind. It's going to be very relevant because the whole premise of these so-called reciprocal tariffs accounting for trade deficits does not apply here. Also, Trump has threatened other countries in these letters that he will increase their tariffs by an additional 10% unless they cut ties with BRICS nations. The B in BRICS, of course, stands for Brazil. All right, so here is some of what Trump said in his letter. "I knew and dealt with former President Jair Bolsonaro and respected him greatly, as did most other leaders of countries. The way that Brazil has treated former President Bolsonaro, a highly respected leader throughout the world during his term, including by the United States, is an international disgrace. This trial should not be taking place. It is a witch hunt that should end immediately." By the way, that's the very beginning of the letter. He opened with that. He goes on to reference Brazil's insidious attacks on free elections. He's talking, of course, about the fact that Bolsonaro is ineligible now to run for office again. And he said that he won't tariff Brazilian goods or companies if they choose to manufacture here in the United States. I'm not sure why they would do that. Also, I don't know who Trump thinks will be doing all of this American manufacturing or where. Anyway, he also threatens Brazil not to tariff us back. He capitalizes random words throughout the document. There are so many exclamation points. And he ends it all by saying, "You will never be disappointed with the United States of America. Thank you for your attention to this matter." This is a big deal because this is the first time that Trump has explicitly cited political reasons for his tariffs as opposed to just economic reasons. By the way, the U.S. gets a third of its coffee from Brazil, so I feel like that one's not going to go over very well with the American people. In response, Lula da Silva was adamant that no foreign leader will tell Brazil how to function, especially where its own internal justice is concerned. He wrote a lengthy post on X saying, "Brazil is a sovereign nation with independent institutions and will not accept any form of tutelage. The judicial proceedings against those responsible for planning the coup d'etat fall exclusively under the jurisdiction of Brazil's judicial branch and as such are not subject to any interference or threats that could compromise the independence of national institutions." The claim regarding a U.S. trade deficit in its commercial relationship with Brazil is inaccurate. Statistics from the U.S. government itself show a surplus of $410 billion in the trade of goods and services with Brazil over the past 15 years. Sovereignty, respect, and the unwavering defense of the interests of the Brazilian people are the values that guide our relationship with the world. And to that point about the trade deficit/surplus, The Guardian investigated Trump's deficit claim, writing, "In fact, the U.S. runs a trade surplus with Brazil, thanks in part to a free trade agreement expanded in 2020 during Trump's first term." They then go on to cite the most recent data from the Brazil Trade Summary that was posted on the website of the United States Trade Representative, Jamison Greer. U.S. total goods trade with Brazil were an estimated $92 billion in 2024. U.S. goods exports to Brazil in 2024 were $49.7 billion, up 11.3%, or $5 billion from 2023. U.S. goods imports from Brazil in 2024 totaled $42.3 billion, up 8.3%, or $3.2 billion from 2023. The U.S. goods trade surplus with Brazil was $7.4 billion in 2024, a 31.9% increase, or $1.8 billion over 2023. And just to cap this story off, I wanted to include this little bit about copper.
And overnight, the president also unveiling another global tariff, a 50% tax on imported copper. The president arguing copper is too important to too many industries and to national defense to just outsource production. The price of the metal had already surged to an all-time high when the president first teased this announcement earlier this week.
Currently, the U.S. imports about half of the copper that we use, most of it from Chile. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said that the Trump administration wants to bring copper production home. No word, however, on how they plan to do that or when that can or even will happen. So what could copper tariffs mean? Former Commerce Secretary under the W. Bush administration, Carlos Miguel Gutierrez, he explained it this way.
The thing about copper that makes it interesting is, it's deemed a national security issue. Importing so much copper, almost 50%, is puts the U.S. at risk. It's a vulnerability. But we don't have capacity right now to offset imports. Perhaps capacity will be online in 27 and 28, assuming that there's a guarantee that those tariffs will stay in place. Because if companies are going to put up capital investment, they've got to know that the status quo will remain. So it's a very tricky one, because in the meantime, what we're going to see is some shortages and price increases.
Trump is trying to use these tariffs as leverage in negotiations, but at least in the case with Brazil, what exactly is he trying to accomplish and why? He is putting out these letters and they're embarrassing. They don't mean much of anything. Some of them have had some pretty bad typos in them. And what is with all of the weird capitalization and exclamation points? It all feels very sophomoric, and this is supposed to be his big show of strength on the world stage. I wonder if the rest of the world will see him for what he is. He's a child throwing a temper tantrum. He's a bully trying to get his own way. Trump seems to think that when he was bestowed the presidency, that all of the respect of that office, all of the respect that it once held, would be handed down to him, and maybe it was. But now it's kind of tanked. I can't imagine that many other countries or leaders take him and by extension us seriously. I think he still has a military to throw some weight around, but I also think it's very clear to other nations that the might of this nation is simply not what it once was. Our government can't keep its own goals and strategies straight. We're wasting money on frivolity. We're teasing war with foreign nations. We're in the pocket of Israel. We have a widening wealth gap, which only serves to weaken this nation. And the American people are practically in open revolt against the actions of our government. The whole world saw those No Kings protests. They know where we stand. They see Trump's approval ratings tanking. Time will tell how this will all play out, but either way, Trump seems to be in for a rude awakening. That is assuming that he's even lucid enough to see them. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.